4:30, so let's start the meeting. Guys, Mr. Stuff.
Sorry.
So let's do the call to the order and please introduce ourselves. Heidi Vivar is here, I haven't seen you before this year. So if we want to go around, really. DG architecture.
I have a question, Madam Chairman. Do we have a quorum? Do we know?
Today, it doesn't matter if we have quorum or not, we can have the meeting anyway, and people who didn't come here today will not be counted as non-assistent. So we can have the meeting anyway, and we're not gonna be voting.
Okay.
Okay, it's a special meeting because of the hurricane. So we wanna go over the September 21st.
Kathy DeQuay going a little bit here to discuss Robert Rules of Laws. She'll come to the December meeting.
Okay, great.
That's basically where they describe sunshine, your emails, your communications with each other, you're a whole, so you got to do the whole entity, the chair,
Oh, sure.
and phone
So we need to approve the, go over the minutes for the September 21st.
Forgot to get that.
stuff. I don't think you can approve or vote on anything. 'cause
We don't have enough
quorum.
quorum, so we're gonna leave the minutes for next meeting.
You sure you don't have a quorum?
Oh, let me see, Jenny, do we have quorum today?
Let's see, let me just check and see how many we've got.
Let's find out, we'll find out in a minute.
Over on 6, 8, 9.
Well, how many members are officially on there? And I think it's.
There's
great
10
to-
people who signed in,
Pardon me?
10 people who signed in for today's
No,
meeting.
what should be here if everybody came? How many people should be here?
There were, if everybody can, it'd be a total of 15.
Okay,
Oh, so we have quorum, yeah,
so if we're at 8, we're good to go.
Yep.
Okay,
so
minutes,
here, may I hope everyone have the chance to review the meeting from last meeting.
Quick question, I'm sorry, if I could back up, you said Mr. Pre-Bun is gonna be here in December?
she won't be available to come and talk about Robert's Rules of Laws till December.
We don't currently have a December meeting, and we're gonna be canceling it.
Well, the next meeting or the next meeting after that, I just saw her in her office.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to point it out that we don't typically meet in December.
She had intended to be here, but there's an emergency meeting, putting together an RFQ, so she's just not available.
Okay.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
So, hey, you are the one with the experience, so. So I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the September meeting.
So moved.
Who seconded, please?
Second.
You did. Okay, thank you.
Just on time. So the next item on our agenda is,
So the committee trained
there,
Kathy.
so it's the board member update.
Okay.
That is just perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah, they were already accepted. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss that? We
You
need to
gotta
vote
do
to accept the minutes. Oh,
You had a first from Ryan and a second
second,
from.
and now we gotta vote.
Dana.
In favor?
So I say, you gotta accept the train wreck today, okay? It's my first meeting.
You're supposed to coach it, you know, you're up.
All in favor?
Awesome.
Aye. Opposed?
I like that. That was nice. Good job.
So are we doing situational update on the hurricane with all the stuff about the buildings?
I'm gonna read exactly what was read to the board yesterday.
Well, then guess what? He's gonna give, because it's what I was gonna do, only I didn't have slides,
I'll let
so.
you do it, I'll flip the pages. It's your call.
You can do it together if you want.
I wouldn't want to deprive you, because I know how much you love PowerPoints. Did you put it up there yourself?
Frederick helped me.
I think somebody did.
It took two of us.
I had to do that. I'm infamous for my little and Scott needed one, and he knows it's all in good fun.
You're like my work wife. I did it at home, so it's okay.
Okay, so do you have any other updates?
We'll see when Scott's done, and I'll add if there's anything, but if it's what we were given yesterday,
It's exactly.
I won't, there's nothing new that came
Okay,
across the
Scott,
lines
so
today, so.
if you wanna work together on this, we'll be
I'm
great.
just gonna-
Sure. So this is a situational update. This was the briefing that was given to the board and the community at yesterday's briefing meeting. So I felt it was appropriate to just relay this same information to you as it is the most current coming directly to the board. They were providing an update to the board of all the reopenings of the school and how we phase that through. We've got all the schools opened up, with the last two schools being Lexington and Diplomat Middle, last to come online. I believe the teachers came back on Halloween Day, and on November 1st, the kids came back. So what they did is we did an engagement with the school where the teachers came back and the administration to get acclimated. And then the second day, the children were actually brought back into it. So it gave a little bit of a buffer for the teachers to kind of see what their rooms, what condition they may be in, and how they be teaching for the foreseeable future. Reopening schools up to Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, obviously Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel had tidal influence. Fort Myers Beach had approximately 8 to 10 feet of water inside of it. Structurally, the building's in good shape, but we had an architect go through and do a review. The interior needs a full gut because of saltwater intrusion. There is a 50% rule now. If the cost of rebuilding is 50% greater than the value of the project, you possibly have to meet all new current codes, which could mean the new FEMA flood elevations, which I believe they're in the throes of revising those as we speak, and I'm sure this isn't helping it. And it's usually, the flood elevation plus a foot, which may make it prohibitive to even consider Fort Myers Beach. That hasn't been determined, but it may make it prohibitive. Sanibel, we actually went out there, and Sanibel it fared bad, but it didn't fare as bad as everyone thought, although there was a full surge of water there. 4 of the newer buildings actually did not get any water intrusion other than some minor water slipping in under some door jams and wet carpet right in that general area. Some of the older sections of the buildings that were at a lower elevation actually had, in some cases, 2 to 3 feet of water within those. So we are out there doing our mitigation program. They will dry it out. They will take out anything that's mold driven. They'll dry it out with the desiccant dryers. They'll do air clearance samples. And then we will work in what we are temporarily calling our phase 2, which is the build back. So if any of you understand what our phase 1 was, phase 1 was engaging in 3 national firms that do storm remediation, mitigation, and stabilization. This is their business. They came in, and the intent was to come in, seal the envelope, secure the envelope, get out any demuck, any wet moldy material, break everything down that had mold, start to grow, do air quality samples. So we open the schools back up. In many cases, some classrooms don't have full complement of ceiling tile, some classrooms don't have carpet, some classrooms have the casework that had gotten wet and the mold had begun, taken out. And that's the way they stand today. They're holding class in there. Everything was wiped down, certified by hygienists. And we are now getting ready to move into our phase 2. So understand many of our buildings have tarps on the roof that, have been tied in with the drains and so forth and the scuppers. As a temporary remediation stabilization effort. We now will go into the phase 2, which is where we go back to putting it to pre-storm conditions, okay? Let's see. You all have been watching the news. I just spoke to Diplomat and Lexington being the last schools to return. Hector Cafaretta, if you hadn't heard, was an entire loss. We're remediating that school right now, and we're evaluating. We had an architect go out and do an evaluation on the rebuilding of the bones of the building, the structure, versus a potential tear down and a rebuild of some type of prototype on that campus. And we are looking into a staging campus right now, possibly, we're waiting for costing, which would be located behind the Cape Coral High Tech Center, in which we would stage, and that is an effort, the students right now have been split to two different sister schools in the West Zone. So depending on how the superintendent, the board, and cabinet, and everyone feels, the intent is to try to reunify the school as a whole in a portable campus. So that is actually where Captain Wayburn and others are now. They're working through some contract language to set up that portable campus to get that possibly moving, and I believe, correct if I'm not wrong, to present something to the board. There's a special meeting, I think, on Friday, something to the board to either get their approval or the buy-in or have discussions in regards to that topic. Alright, many of the schools that, for instance, Sanford, Hector Cafaretta, and Fort Myers Beach, we are allowing teachers to go and collect their personal belongings. Hector Cafaretta was one of the first, where the mitigators actually went in and made sure everything was wiped down and cleaned. And then they created bins and had the bins delivered to the sister schools where the teachers are so that they could get their personal items back and utilize them where they're at now. Fort Myers Beach, we've cataloged everything and we're preparing to bring that same process to the Fort Myers Beach staff as well so they could collect their personal belongings. In Sanibel, we're in the process of cleaning that, and that also will occur at the Sanibel school, and their personal belongings will be delivered to whatever campus location they're located at. I believe it's St. Paul's Park. So we talked about Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel. Superintendent, I believe board members have all visited some of these campuses. In addition, they are providing services at the shelter, which has moved from the, I want to say Hertz Arena, I believe it was, to a setup in North Fort Myers. I think it was an old Publix or what have you, and I think they're staying in the shelter.
They had been in several different shelters, and then we had to close the shelters where we were running them in schools, and then I think they went to Hertz, and then from Hertz, they went to this lovely facility.
And obviously, we as a school district have an interest and we have students that are still there with their families. So we, visited there, coordinated transportation, coordinated, making sure they're either attending their school or really getting them reassigned to school. So just done a great job on our academic team engaging with those shelters and the students that are still there.
We spoke about Hector Cafaretta. This is an interior picture of the central corridor hallway. The whole roof, that had an EPDM rubber roof. The whole roof came up and literally everything underneath that roof is saturated.
What is that? Okay.
Hector Cafaretta is off of Santa Barbara Boulevard, off of Pine Island Road, right at, you know where that Roger Dean Chevrolet is?
Yeah,
It would be to the east of that.
how old is the school?
Right next to Fort Myers Technical
The
College.
school was built in
State College, technically.
2005-ish. It was a modular building, meaning prepackaged modular building. Not a little more than a portable, structural steel, tubular steel frame, concrete hallways, decking, where everything is built in a factory, almost like a modular home. And the structural steel frames are actually stacked, fully welded, bolted. I mean, the bones of the school are strong as a bull. Unfortunately, the skin, obviously, when you're buying, I think back in the day, that was only an $8 million project. It was meant to be a staging school, similar to where we built the Kmart's to be staging school. But because at that time there wasn't funding and we had a need for the capacity, that's when at that time the board and the superintendent turned those two, what we were Kmart's into full-time schools. And also turned Hector Cafaretta into a full-time school to accommodate the student group. So this is in the discussion stages. The information's been provided to the superintendent and his team. I'm sure they'll be briefing the board on those findings and determinations as to how we move forward with Cafaretta will come in future couple of days here. This is just student staff data, how many students returned, how many staff returned. There was a big concern as to, will there be teachers there for all the kids? Well, how many kids are really gonna come back? And some kids even leave the state and go live with family in other states, and as well as bus drivers too. They looked at the statistics, how many, we already had a problem with bus driving before the incident. How many are physically, not gonna come back? So they've been managing that, and I believe it's been a pretty big success. I think they're saying 80 to 90% return rate for teachers and students for the most part. I don't know.
With teachers, the average has been at SPALC and TALC, the teachers and the support, averaging around 92%. Now, there are a few outliers that are lower than that, but around 92% is what we've been saying.
And that, I think that's pretty amazing, and credit should be given to both students, parents, and teachers for the willingness to come back and.
Yeah, and if I may, I personally, since I was a teacher for a long time here in the district, I personally know several teachers that had their houses wiped out, and they are there. Most of them that I know, well, 2 of them are at Estero High School, and I know one is living in a trailer next to her own home, and so we have significant numbers of teachers and other staff, of course, and those teachers have gone back.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is difficult.
Tenants and approaches, this is just some of the information they gave to the board on services. I don't know that I need to read everything. Financial update, there was a preliminary assessment done by our insurance companies and their adjusters. Initially, it came in at $230 million. There is discussion now that they're looking at the numbers more closely, and I believe it's approaching potentially $500 million, 500 million estimated. For those, they had a recruitment fair. Again, this was just to try and bring in more teachers and support, knowing a need. So this was huge because they actually did recruit some people for the effort. Superintendent commented about the team's approach, his tours, his working with the community, and his commitment to get us back to a pre-storm condition. And his line, and I'll probably mess it up, compassion and
Grace
grace and compassion is his leading words, you know, for both staff, the community, you know, to help get through this. And stability, school is a stability item. It allows parents to go back to work. It gets kids in school to get back on the learning track where we lost so much due to COVID. It provides kids with 2, sometimes 3 square meals. And it takes people's minds off it, not just students, but I think staff as well. I know I'm glad not to be looking at my torn up roof and my flooded car, so I think overall it was a pretty good response, and I think the superintendent and the staff and the school board have even stated such that it's amazing what we've been able to accomplish. It's only half of the battle, but to get people back in the buildings was a pretty amazing feat out of 87 facilities. But now the hard lift comes, and now the build back, the financing, how we approach this. The already depleted materials and construction prior to the storm only exacerbated by a storm where everybody needs roof, everybody needs sheetrock, and so it's gonna be a tough run. But we'll get through it, we'll work as a team, we'll figure it out. So that's all I have, does anybody have any
Yeah, do you mind if I just add 1 or 2 things, is that okay? Okay, so another, something on the Hector Caparata education. Yeah, it is Sanibel, and I think it's the K2 section of Hector Caparata that's in San Carlos Park Elementary School, which has had room, and then grades 3 to 5 are separated. Do you remember which school?
Yeah, I think Hector is out in the west.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Pelican and Hancock.
Yeah, okay. Here's the problem. It's been a big issue with that community, because think of the number of people that have children that are in that K2 or 3 through 5. And so you have often one sibling going to one school and then another to a faraway school. And so Dr. Bernier has been very, very responsive to all of these communities. And he had a Zoom meeting with parents from Hector Caparata, and he said that there were 250 people that signed in to that Zoom. And it's so important, and Scott already mentioned that there's going to be, I always call them like portable city, but there's going to be a campus of portables, and as you said, behind, the tech school in Cape Coral, and that's important because apparently there's already utilities, and you would be more familiar than I am with that. And you actually just provided some additional information to me about Hector Cafarado, because I knew it was 2005, and I was on that tour, and I'm sure with the business that most of you are in, that you've seen carnage, wreckage like this, but I had never been in a building that looked quite like that school when I took the tour. And when I learned that it wasn't flood exactly, right? You don't consider it flood, it was total, complete roof failure, so that the water just poured in and in and in. So Dr. Bernier is very good about bringing in, not that we don't have expertise here, but bringing in additional expertise. So he brought in Mr. Jeff Wagner to serve as a consultant in operations. And so he happened to be there when I walked out of Hector, like, oh my God. And so, and I don't know much about construction beyond what I see on HGTV. And, but I did know about, sometimes it's cheaper just to tear down. I learned that on HGTV.
Those
Learned a
prices
lot
aren't
of-
real on HGTV.
What?
Those prices aren't real either.
Well, that fact is correct though, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. You did have to point that out, didn't you? Now I'll never be able to watch again, but I do that. But anyway, so I kind of pressed him on, well, why did that roof? What happened with the roof? And I'll let Scott knows the name of the kind of roof, but
Well, it's EPDM rubber. We use a 4-ply system or metal roofs on most of our buildings. Some have shingle, some don't. The reason for that came with the prepackaged design. It was a design build, modular building. So hence it came with it. 2020 hindsight, the school's about 15 years old. EPDM, especially in our sunlight, doesn't last that long. Possibly had we replaced that roof with a 4-ply system, we may not be having a conversation about that building, but that's 2020 hindsight.
yeah,
We don't use rubber EPDM roofs on our facilities, we will never use them. That happened to be a prepackaged purchase unit that at the time, the board, the superintendent had a need for quick seats. And that school was built in about 7 months.
was that Browder's ring?
Yeah,
Also supposed to be a temporary school, not
a
a.
staking school,
I
that's.
didn't
I
didn't realize,
So
I
I
didn't
built that
realize it
school,
was.
and I'll tell you, I put that school, the structure, the frames,
Oh,
because it's welded
okay.
tubular steel, I put it up against anything we've got built here. Now, that doesn't mean the skin, the
Yeah.
exterior skin, and everything wouldn't blow away. But that thing is 4x4 tubular steel box frame. Each classroom is a box frame, stacked welded on a filled stem wall system with foundation. It survived many of the other storms where other of our permanent schools had issues. So unfortunately, had we not had an EPDM roof on that, we might not have been in this situation.
Okay, well, you've supplied a lot of good information to me, because obviously Mr. Wagner only knew what he knew. He doesn't have a history with this district, but all he would say is, well, it wouldn't be the kind of roof I would have put
That's right.
on there. But the interesting thing, since you brought up the structure, as a teacher and as somebody who knows how much blood, sweat, and tears there are in the files and all of the things that teachers collect over the years, I was very interested to see how those things were being preserved and what was there. And the company, Cotton, they had placed this one room I went into, a whole bunch of things in the middle, and it covered them with, the thick not the tarp, but the plastic.
Biscuit,
Yeah, and there on the whiteboard was the next day's assignment. And I said to somebody afterward, I said, I felt like Pompeii or something, you know, where you go in and it's like, this is what was happening at that moment. I mean, okay, that's a little bit of an exaggeration to call it Pompeii, but as a former teacher to see, it was moving to me to see there was the assignment and the school was just a complete wreck. So I've been pushing and I hope that all of our local delegation, nobody really wants to say exactly who has been and hasn't been, but to me, everybody who funds schools needs to have gone through a school like that and some of our other schools to see exactly what we're dealing with. And as you said, yeah, about the structure, but it's not just loss of the structure, it's all that technology and everything else that goes with it. So really, that's the only thing I have to add, but I did want to emphasize that Dr. Bernier is doing a really good job connecting, and he's connected with Fort Myers Beach community and Sanibel community as well. And if you all know anything about Sanibel, they take such pride in that school. And actually, I'm not gonna be on the board when that discussion comes up on to rebuild or not, but what Scott said was very accurate about the cost. And right now, it's a very, very low student population. I think the latest I heard was 67.
at Fort Myers Beach, yeah, it's very
Something
good.
like that, so you can read the handwriting on the wall, but nothing has been decided, and that'll be up to the next new board, so. That was my report, thank you for delivering.
We did a good job.
So may I ask a question on this, how this is gonna affect, because in the meantime, the demographics are still changing and the population is still growing, so now you have potentially $500 million to repair the schools. What happened with the plan of the classrooms that you need?
Okay,
On top
all the
of
new
that.
contracts, all the new contracts that we gave to companies like yours are being canceled. I'm just kidding. Sorry. No, we've been instructed that since all of the new seats and requirements, which are being funded by the tax referendum, that's what it was for, those projects were continuing. And specifically, my department will be continuing the oversight, working with all of you guys on those 5-year capital plan programs. They're gonna move forward. As far as the rebuilding of these schools to get them to pre-storm condition, we are engaging with a program management firm to help support operations. For right now, they've only been engaged to review all of the time and material tickets and invoicing that will come in from those 3 national mitigation firms. We've hired other consultants, Cross Imperium. Lessons learned from previous storms and having such a hard time working with FEMA and the documentation to get paid. We still have, I think, money from Charlie that we are owed, that just because of the paperwork, so they hired professionals to help work with us, to guide us, to send us in the right direction and ensure that all these paper processes can be put forth for maximum refund for FEMA in the future. And in an effort, because that's gonna be so huge, the tickets, the daily time tickets, because that's how FEMA wants everything reported, time and material. It's just an endeavor to go through like an auditing process, to go out into school, validate the P&M tickets against the sheetrock that they have replaced. They didn't rebuild any work. So if we replaced sheetrock, it was because I had to cut a 2-foot ripping from flooding. And I can't allow students to get cut by the metal studs or get their hands into an electrical box, things of that nature. So we put the sheetrock back up. I didn't take the spackle, I didn't finish it, I didn't paint it. It's called remediation and stabilization, we saved it all. You'll go in classrooms and there may be 15 ceiling tiles missing, or more. That's rebuilding, we're not doing that. There's been a commitment from the board and from the superintendent to use our local partners that we're engaged with them to provide the work to the local community. So that's phase 2. We're trying to figure out a vehicle of how we do that. Without getting into the RFQ process, everyone here is well aware RFQs, 6 months, long duration, we don't have that time. I'm entering dry season, I need to get roofs on. If I go through a 6-month RFQ process, I'm right back in rainy season with basically blue tarps on buildings and I'll be doomed again. So what we're doing is we're approaching the state because our, what we call our GT contracts, which is continuing contract, which many of you are part of, we are requesting the state for a temporary emergency increase in that amount. Now, what that amount might be, Susan and her staff are working with legislatures and FDOE to see what that needs to be. To raise that so that we can go right through our continuing contract list and start getting work immediately going with work authorization. So that'll expedite the process if that occurs, so I'm hopeful for that. I don't have another answer or a vehicle from you because the only other option is an RFQ, and certainly we can do emergency things and try to expedite that 6 months and trim it down to maybe something like 3, but still, it's gonna take a while. And then again, as I mentioned, we're exacerbating everything with the storm because we're not gonna be able to get the materials like we used to. It was difficult to keep up with our normal work that you guys are currently doing for the expansions. And now I've got a whole litany of schools that are fighting for those same components as well as every building, every house, every strip mall, all the way down. So we're trying to find a vehicle to get our continuing local contractor on board so we can issue work authorizations at all these campuses and get the work moving. So hopefully we'll have more to report by the time we have our next meeting.
I do have a question, but I missed,
Yeah,
I moved
sorry.
to the line before.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Please
thank
go
you.
ahead.
About the roof, you know, I mean, it's just, there is a lot of deterioration throughout. I mean, the roof for that school, the EBM, DBO, we use it all over. I mean, it's not something that, you know, that we can just neglect, and Florida code as a roofer contractor stipulates DBO. So it is not something that we should let people be scared of.
Oh, no, I disagree. EPDM, we live in a subtropical environment where the average temperature here is 95 plus with direct sunlight. EPDM is a rubber product. As you go to your home, you put anything that's plastic, PVC outside, it disintegrates because of UV rays and heat. I've done a lot of EPDM roofs in my life, mostly in the private sector for large ENR 100 companies. If it's an Irma roof, upside down Irma roof, where you have a ballast that protects it from the UV rays and it's protected, it's black from year to year. But when it's exposed directly to the sun like that, you get the shrinkage at all the seams and you start getting blistering. The minute water gets underneath, it causes steam. The minute the steam gets underneath, it starts pushing it just like a balloon. And the greater the balloon rises, the greater the seams overlap. So I disagree with rubber roofing. It is a very quick, cheap, easy fix. I don't think it's appropriate for ultra hot environments unless you have something that protects it from direct UV attacks.
We're not gonna go into technicalities, but what I can tell you is, if there is,
It's okay.
if there is, do we have a, like, in Miami area, they have a 40 years inspection. Do we have that implemented in our system or in our
The
building?
school district has specifications that they require for the roofs, the systems now in the way that are hurricane-proof, all of the new schools. I don't expect absolutely any problem with the new schools, and you can see it in the reports. What Scott is talking is about the old schools that were not done under the specifications. And if I'm not wrong, I don't think there's any roof that is.
We do not
40
have
years old.
Carlisle, for example, Carlisle is just a better Firestone makes it 2. We do not have rubber roofs in our specifications.
No, do we have regular inspections
Yes.
every few years?
Well,
That's my
no,
question.
not every 2 years. The
No,
state-
not every few
The
years.
state requires us every 5 years to do facility assessments. And we engage an architectural firm and they go through all of our campus and they do a facility assessment. If I'm not mistaken, I think Joel just went out and engaged a firm for the next assessment that is due to FDOE. I'm not sure if that got approved by the board and moving forward, but it's getting ready to happen.
We don't have a yearly preventive maintenance program that goes.
I don't wanna speak for maintenance, what they have or they don't have, I'm not maintenance. There may be something where they have people that do it, I'm just not aware of
Preventive
maintenance.
maintenance.
So, Brian, you got something?
Well, you mentioned a little bit about the, you know, the retainage of teachers and bus drivers. Do you have any like real numbers on the students that came back? Is it in the same ballpark, or is it kind of a different animal?
I'm going to defer to the board member, she might have more
Yeah,
information.
it really differs. You can look at some schools that are in the upper nineties and some other schools that are perhaps still down in, I can actually look it up on my phone later, but, yeah, cause your slide didn't have the student numbers, did it?
Yeah, I can speak on that.
Or maybe they did.
I have an email that
But you
comes
have
out
that,
every day.
okay, yeah.
So like for
The other
yesterday,
thing,
for example.
Frederick, if I can just say this, that actually goes to one of your questions too. Dr. Bernier has set a specific date, which is the day after Thanksgiving. Did you say the 28th? Scott, you made, or Frederick, you made, I think he's, the 28th of November or the 29th. 28th is the Monday after, it's one of those 2 days, that's a date specific. And by that time, the kids that haven't shown up, and we're going out, the district, as well as, of course, the principals, and I'm thinking, some like social workers, and I mean, there's a real push to locate some of these families that we just can't locate, and you know, think about this, losing their phone, losing their connections and all of that. But if they haven't shown up yet by that date, they will not be considered. And of course, another way we find out that we take them off our roll is, for instance, if we get a request for transcripts from a school in Massachusetts for, you know, Johnny Jones, who was at Hector or something, you know, that's the other way. And it's the same thing, it's with the teachers and other personnel. Dr. Bernier has been, you know, very generous on the grace and compassion, but you have to put a lid on it at a certain point. So at that point, when you're talking about classrooms and all, there's, I'd say it's beyond a good possibility. I'm gonna say it's very likely that our number of students will not be the number that we had before. That said, we've had brand new, believe it or not, people that have chosen to move here like last week.
Yeah.
I mean, what a time to arrive, right? But, so we are still getting the students, but usually we get them and the others pretty much stay. But this, have you heard any estimates, either of you, on how many? I mean, we really don't know till we reach that number, but at some point, it just has to happen.
I'll bet you just from being on the roadways and the increased traffic for the students that maybe haven't come back and gone elsewhere to live with relatives and possibly other states, for all the construction workers and people and their families, so you might end up being even Steven where those that went out and those that came in for the work with their families.
Some said that, but I don't know.
So Ryan,
It's still pretty expensive.
Another question?
to answer your question, since we've opened, student attendance has been ranging from 82 to 90% on a daily basis.
How are you gonna finance that 230 million, $100 billion?
I don't sit at those levels where the dollars are discussed, maybe Frederick at cabinet level has some information on that, so I'll defer to Frederick.
Yeah, so multiple ways, you know, we are insured, so we have insurance, we are looking to make sure all our expenditures are in line with FEMA, so we can, you know, take care of FEMA reimbursements. And then, you know, we do have other capital expenditure that we would normally have that we, you know, would have to go into if need be. So we have some pots of money.
I can probably help you with that, because I was in Charlie when in Charlie it was 400 or 500 million, 450 million, I think that we had to repair in the schools, and some schools altogether, but so I was I had to go around with the insurance. The school district is insured, and there's different levels of insurance. It goes 50 million to 100 million is a different type of insurance, and 100 to 200 million is different. There's different companies involved because it's a national insurance, so as you get that threshold, there's different levels of requirements, but at the bottom line is your deductible. You have a deductible for every building out there. Every school, if the school has 10 buildings, you have a deductible for each building, so they're gonna go with that, and then that's what you start out with. But then there's, levels of insurance, reinsurance. There's reinsurance. I think that's probably what you had before.
When are you gonna start this, repair or?
That's
Phase
phase two, and again, as I spoke to, I don't have a vehicle to engage with contractors to do that work at this time.
Because
So,
because
well,
of the
think
state
about it, if I
level,
got a school that has a roof gone, carpet missing, ceiling tile, paint, sheet rock, electrical devices have to be replaced, I know the roof alone is $4 million.
so that's why the CCNA.
The roof on this building was $4 million, so basically, I've capped out on my continuing contract with statutory ceiling.
I thought that there was an exception under the emergency.
Well, that's what they're working with, that's gotta be the state FDOE, it's gotta be the legislature and all those things that Susan and the superintendent and his staff have been working on to try. The state has committed to help us in every way, shape they can. Those conversations are ongoing, and nothing would be better for me than to say, tell me, yep, we're gonna raise that cap $10-15 million and boom. We're starting to assign schools and construction managers and design teams, and we're getting it going, because I need to get materials ordered.
You gotta do like a design build kind of, with the contractor comes in.
No, we would have an architect most likely develop a scope for the need, what has to be repaired, replaced. We would ask the construction managers and put together a GMP for that. And then we would issue work authorizations against the board approval of that GMP amount per school.
Is there anything as a committee that we can do to help, or any way that you need us to help as a committee?
Sarcastically, if you got 500 million, you could spot it.
Oh, that would be great. If I can, I'll retire tomorrow, no problem.
Just when it comes time, if we can get this help to get to phase two rolling, your concerted efforts, and many of you have been working with us to do the assessments at the very beginning. Continue that effort to hammer it out, be patient with us, in terms of notices to proceed and work authorizations, because we still have to follow all our same process. But everything here is going at lightning speed, so we appreciate your patience in working with us, keep it moving. And the same will happen when we get to go phase two going.
Scott, have you talked to your general counsel or procurement yet? The governor's executive order relieves a lot of the procurement guidelines that you have to follow as a district. So that may allow you to just handpick consultants or contractors.
They're aware.
I'm sure that they're aware. Susan's pretty much on top of it, and Tracy's working as the director now over in procurement, and I know they're looking at every angle to try and expedite this.
That's what the executive order is specifically for.
Yeah, to your question, and I don't know how long you've been on the board, but Ryan, you were the past committee person. Has this, and for all of you who've been on this, has this committee put forth official advisory recommendations in the past?
We've done a few.
Yeah,
That's
official
what we said about
information,
the-
absolutely.
Okay,
Many of the-
so,
As a committee, no?
Many of the recommendations
Yeah.
were in terms of the RFP process. That was a biggie that went forward to the board for recommendation. I believe Susan's gonna implement some of those decisions when the 3-year term comes up with the contract.
yeah, I'm not sure what will come up that would be appropriate for you guys to make a recommendation, but that's the official way to do that, to make a recommendation. And I don't know, has your committee ever toured any schools, like schools under construction or?
As a committee?
The previous committee did do tours of active capital projects that were going on.
Okay, so, this is, I just had my last action meeting last night. So whoever wins the District 6 seat will be in this seat for your next meeting. But, yeah, that's what I would recommend. And, if it suits this committee, because you're the people really in charge, we're just liaisons. You might even, vote to tour something and.
Absolutely. We usually, when we have one of our large capitals, currently we have an Anacera Elementary that is being built. We have the staging campus that will be completed in December for Franklin Park rebuild. Franklin Park demolition and rebuild will begin probably around February, plus or minus, depends on the GMP and the board approval. So that'll be a project that'll be underway. And we have several other schools in the 5-year capital plan that have been advertised, put out there. I know you guys are all, getting scheduled to do your presentations and the books and all that sort of thing, so. I believe it's OO and.
They've already been awarded.
They
Oh,
were,
okay, so
Yeah,
those
the
are-
presentations were canceled.
the presentations were canceled.
Yeah.
Okay, that might be because of the storm. I don't believe that anybody has kiboshed the job, or have they sent?
No, they
something?
were called before the RFQs because they don't know if they are repeat prototypes or go to
So they're
RFQ
still figuring
process.
out the numbers. Okay, that's in the planning department, so.
Yeah, what's,
Yeah. So, I'm sorry.
the school I was at today was Pine Island Elementary.
Pine Island Elementary, believe it or not, came out almost unscathed, literally.
Good.
And the funny, ironic thing is, next to Pine Island Elementary, there's all wetlands and, not Melaleucas,
Mangroves.
mangroves that back up to that property and the wild pigs, I go out there all the time. They built a Publix right next door to it, and they screwed up some of the elevations, and we were getting flooding in our back in the playground area, so we brought in more fill, we elevated the playground and so forth. I thought for sure when I heard about the storm surge that school was gonna be done. Nothing.
Good.
Well, that was perfect. The biggest problem we had there was power. We had our mitigation companies, as soon as they were able to get trucks across that temporary bridge, they brought in a generator, hooked the school up to get the air running. We had a school employee who lives out on the island, and the first thing he did was retrieve all the food out of the freezer, and they donated it to the local community out there, so it didn't go to waste, and the people, because they were Gilligan's Island, there was no way to get there other than a boat. And I live near there, the damage is unbelievable. Burt's Bar, if you ever know, and a staple for Matt Lachey and the artist out there, Lovegrove, all those little shaker shacks, in the tropical colors are gone. I mean, gone. Michelle survived, they're open, they just opened
Yeah,
yesterday.
they opened yesterday.
But yeah, it came out pretty good, they're in good shape, man, school's open. Who'd have thought?
Okay, well, anybody has any other question, we'll move to,
Real quick there, to answer Ayub's question on EPDM roofs, is that the reason we don't do EPDM roofs is that it's a single,
like,
yeah, it's a single way of failing the roof. That we're modified to have 3, 4, or 5 layers. The EPDM is just, there's just too easy to get inside the roof.
Well, I think the biggest drawback on those is when you end up with service up on the roof. If someone's got a change of belt in an air conditioner or fix a fan motor, you drop the screw, step on it.
Punctures and
Well, and the other part is, you gotta remember, when we do our 3-layer roofs, it's hot mopped in, each layer. It's a positive bond that cools and then seals. When you do an EPM, it's held down with adhesive, glues, basically contact cement with a roller. And now, you know what happens with glues that expose to heat. Over time, the glue disintegrates and it no longer has a contact. And the problem with the EPDM roof without any ballast, which serves 2 purposes. 1, to keep air from uplift, from bringing it up and delaminating it. And 2, it prevents the sun, the deterioration from solar. So it's a good roof. I had EPDM on a house I had, and it was off the kitchen on the back slope, real low slope, couldn't use the shingle, up in New Jersey, and it was fine for the purpose I had. But on a school building, a large area, flat roof, down here with the heat, it's not practical. And like you said, one guy goes through there, he steps on a screw, and you've lost the seal of the roof. And the minute the water gets into the insulation, you're done.
I mean, we're not gonna go back and forth because none of us have wrote the code, 1 second, ma'am. None of us have wrote the code on using roofing material, did you? So, my question is, there is material that is being used, if it is installed properly, then, and maintained properly, then it will stay as long as it should. So, I'm not gonna argue what you use in your commercial work or not. I'm just saying this material exists in Florida code. So there is no need, there is many things that fail. If they remove it from the code, then we can say, yeah. But what you use in your bids, it's your business. But we cannot just criticize something that is in the code, it's been approved, it's worked many times. So we can go back and forth on that.
I can argue that point, because
I-
I had two roofs that failed, that were
Mr.
EPDM roofs.
Castellanos,
Oh, sorry.
then why we don't leave the construction materials for after the meeting? I don't think it's appropriate for this meeting, and we have another topic that we need to go over till 9. So this is the first meeting of the new year, and we need to discuss, it's a different year because the everything that we just have. And there's a list of topics that will be nice if we can cover in these meetings and we can make them productive. I have different talks, different meetings, I've collected a list, but I'm sure that you have your own topics that you might wanna add to the list. But one of the things that I had is, of course, keep talking about the hurricane and what is the impact in future growth. The demographics are changing, you all saw the traffic, I'm sure it's gonna be a lot of people displaced, moving to other areas of the county. So I would like to suggest to invite planning here, so they can come to us and see what planning has in mind for the future of Lee County and where the schools are gonna be needed, because I'm sure the demographics are changing. The other thing is, and you covered that a little bit, is about the barrier islands. Does it make sense to keep having schools in the barrier islands? So it's time to start to think in the continent and leave the barrier islands to have private schools, not the public schools. I had a suggestion about the update on the solar. There were a couple of meetings last year, but we never saw the final report. So if we can see a final report. And the other thing is, we talk about this, how as a CAC committee, what kind of recommendations, how can we be helpful to the school district? And there were talks last year about site selection in new schools, and I believe this committee was gonna be involved, right? You were involved in that, so I think that we need to go back to those ideas.
Well, anything that, I'm sure Frederick, because it reports under Frederick, any property purchases that involve a potential school build, I'm sure that we can have a presentation from planning as it's brought forward before it goes to the property selection committee. It used to be that this committee made a recommendation prior to that, so I'm sure if the staff over there chooses to buy a parcel prior to engaging in that, when they're doing due diligence, we can have them come and do a presentation for us to get either our thumbs up or thumbs down, and that can go with the recommendation to the property selection committee, which ultimately goes for the board for the ratification to purchase the property.
When you bring it to the committee, you'll have engineering reports, environmental reports, and we have to make a decision based on some data.
Correct, I would think that during the engagement, doesn't mean you buy the property, but you agree that you're going to do it and you start doing your due diligence.
Okay.
When that information is passed, they should, well, I think Frederick was replying, and this is the way it worked previous, years ago. They would bring that information to this committee, we review it, we talk about it, and we make a recommendation. That recommendation would be part of the things that go to the property selection committee. They have a very specific group of people that are nominated to sit on that committee when it's brought forward and vote for it to move forward to the board or not. So yes, we can be that stepping stone just before that committee to provide our input.
And that is not, obviously not the current process, but that is something that this committee could recommend if they would like to be part of that process.
We have an established scoring matrix, I mean, we've done it in the past, but it's just, kind of a checklist of how well each site scores on a number of different categories, so.
Yeah, I've been in the committee for a year and I never seen that part. So it would be great to bring it back to, before my time. So it would be great to bring it back so we can be part of that. And I don't know, it's open to everybody, suggestions for next year, for this year.
I just looking at the period before we, the notification of there is a disaster is gonna hit the school and our reaction to it. In other words, if we had a shorter time period between the notification of there is a hurricane or there is a disease gonna hit us and how we react. What if we had the students in the schools at that moment or in an hour? Do we have an emergency plan that include the notification period? Let's say if it hits us in an hour, this is what we're gonna do in a day, this is what we're gonna do in a week, this is what we're gonna do. Do we have a plan like that?
I would say that safety and security
Yep.
through the schools has let's for an example of your question. It might be a tornado pops up from a thunderstorm. I'm sure that the school has a safety protocol on what they do with the children, how they notify the parents, whether they close school, have parents come and get their kids, whether they hunker down. I don't have that information, but I'm sure our safety and security department would like to have information on that to provide it to you.
Yeah, we love to.
Somebody we can invite you.
It takes about 10 times.
Any other topics that you would like to cover next year?
I think we had the historical school that I did last year. Put on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's another thing, last year we talked about once, every other meeting or something, some presentation of what is going on in the district, what schools are coming up. You guys did a fantastic job with Franklin Park. The historic buildings is another one, and there are other schools open.
And we talked about doing some of the other
Yeah.
schools you guys are working on.
Everybody, there are a lot of schools under construction right now.
Well, for historic buildings, we already have done an RFQ, we've already done contracts, we've gone to the board for our phase one, and that's for Bonita Springs Elementary to get that structure back up to shape, and some minor ancillary site civil work to make this campus function better. The reports that were done for all of our other historic schools have been given, maintenance has those, and I believe they're already engaging in some of the minor work that needs to occur. Some first floor sheathing replacement, flooring changes, debris, sealing off the envelope underneath the crawl spaces with visqueen to prevent the moisture that deteriorated the sheathing of the floorboards and the floor joists above it. So there is a report out there, and maintenance will be working on those. Construction will be overseeing the Bonita structural repairs to that historic building.
Just for the record, visqueen is the EPDM of moisture barriers.
Agreed, well, here's the deal, I say visqueen, it could be the heavy duty poly that's yellow and the special 3M tape that sealed it, so I beg forgiveness. I beg forgiveness in my description. But providing a vapor barrier to prevent moisture from going up.
So I don't know if, now I'm gonna ask for help from the previous chair, but if we wanna make a motion to approve these items to be part of our next year or this year calendar for future meetings.
We haven't typically had motions for, subject, specific meeting dates. I mean, we kind of discuss it, talk about it, put out a little bit of a calendar, we'll be doing this in these
Okay.
months. And, it's kind of a general consensus. If you wanna, select, a specific date for those meetings, surely we could approve that, but, I haven't heard any objections from anybody about putting it on the list.
Is there anything else that you wanna add to the list? There are not too many meetings, it's from now
You made
to
one
May.
comment, but I'd like to see the student migration, and I believe, isn't the FERPA or whatever numbers due, like around November? That's when the movement, the final count of students, isn't there something where it determines our FTE or something coming up?
Well, what you talking about that, or you talking more like student projections?
Well, that's gonna determine where the students are moving and the cost per area, that could be for it. Maybe we don't do this addition building or this new building here because the students are all over here now. Maybe it moved over into that zone, which means looking at a piece of property, but when would those numbers be kind of finalized and see how the
All
hurricane?
year, all second semester, proximity plan will be worked on.
So maybe,
Yeah, I
And
would
so,
like
yeah.
to have planning, if
maybe
planning
push
can
that
come
to like
here
a
for
January, February preliminary
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
And then just work with Julia what you guys feel is appropriate in terms of what you like the topic for next week, and Julia can put it on the agenda, and we'll make sure we're prepared for it.
I mean, and I think here's kind of where Clarissa was going with the topic, is that you're right, kids just, they might just be in a different part of town now. But kind of looking at, I believe you alluded to October 28th of that drop dead date of kids coming back. November 28th. So
Where are
yeah,
they
I
going?
think, January, February time range, and it may be appropriate to
Yeah.
talk about it. What's student enrollment per school, at November 28th versus, September 15th? Like, just to look at where the movement has happened
And how that
they
can
shifted.
change the plans that you have to build schools, because Eastleigh is a county that was hot until now, or the area of the county that was very hot until now. Is it gonna be
Getting hotter.
hotter, or,
No?
so that kind of stuff,
I'll give
so
you an example.
I'm sure that planning will have to rearrange
In the West Zone, there
everything.
was a call in 26 for an elementary school.
Mhm.
Well, now we lost 800 elementary seats, so I think the West Zone has now moved up, which
Exactly,
may not be
so-
happy about, but, so those are all things that the planning department's going to have to look at.
So with that, and any other topics you would like to add? We're good? So with that, and because it's 5:31, we're gonna move to a good of the order and then close the meeting.
You did skip public comment, but don't really see.
We don't have public, so I didn't call. Unless somebody wanna play public.
Now, one thing for the good of the order, this Friday, we're having I think this will be our third vendor open house. This is an opportunity for us to welcome in the public, welcome in our vendor community, with an attempt to get them engaged in our construction projects. A lot of you are on our continuing contract for GCs, architects. So, I think we've invited our CMs to have tables at this event so vendors can come meet you to be a subcontractor on your future projects. We've, Scott on some of his recent GMPs, we've been struggling to get maybe some subs in some areas, maybe become even harder with all the work that's out there right now. So we really want to get some more competition on those subcontractor bids. So we're gonna be inviting them in to meet and learn how to register with the CMs, learn how to bid. We're also gonna have a couple upcoming projects that we are currently accepting bids for right now. I think Tola OAK for Franklin Park is open for bidding. Suffolk may have one open for bidding. So we'll have them there, and we've asked them to almost treat this like one of your pre-bid meetings. Talk about the project, recruit your subs in order to get some bids. So that'll be Friday, at 8:00, here in the Caloosahatchee room. So definitely, if you know others who may be interested, invite them to come out. There's a link on our website with all the information and to register, but you don't need to actually register to come. But definitely, would like to have some good participation. It was scheduled before the hurricane. I think we had over 200 registered, but post hurricane, we're about at 100. So we kind of understand people are busy again, so we definitely want to get a good turnout. So that's our vendor open house that's coming up this Friday.
8:00 till when?
Let me get that actual time for you.
Ryan's coming for the free pens all the vendors put on the tables.
Making sure Tobler doesn't throw us under the bus.
I think it's still new.
I'm sorry, so is that from 9 to 12? Friday from 9 to 12, I was gonna need to hear 8 so you can register early, but it starts from 9 to 12 on Friday. And there will be some refreshments there.
Anybody else?
Now, I knew somebody, get somebody.
That's a long list, make sure that we, don't
We're
shut
gonna
up with
do
one
minutes.
meeting,
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Spread it out.
Spread it
Of
out.
course, they need to go home.
That's all I
Of
have.
course, that's from here to May. So we'll pick a
We
topic.
got 5 more meetings, I think, so, and that's all the topics,
We're not gonna cover everything. Okay,
that's all I got.
anybody else?
Just since we lost a meeting, is it worth entertaining the idea of getting our December meeting back?
Do we need to?
Do we need to? Probably not. I mean, there's a list of items to go through. We're losing meetings rapidly. Just
I don't
a
have any problem bringing the meeting back, so if you.
Don't look at me.
It's not a real conflict with any holidays. It's like the first Wednesday in
It's the
December.
first week of December, so.
I know we did do that one year when we had a November meeting canceled because of the storm.
Mhm.
We held it in
That's
December,
the one,
like a
December.
makeup meeting, because I'm not sure what the minimum amount of meetings you have to hold a year is. So you can either go December, or if it's, you have to have a certain minimum, then I guess it would have to be held in June. Depending on that number.
We'll bring the meeting back, and if it does, guys, we'll bring the meeting back. So, just make a
Well,
motion
if we
to,
needed to make a minimum number of meetings, I'd rather
Yeah.
have it in December than in June.
yeah,
Vacation
Do you wanna
time.
make a motion?
Yeah, I just did.
Second,
there you have a motion.
and
All in
I,
favor?
Alright.
Anybody opposed? No. Okay, we have a meeting in December,
December what, 7th?
this first week of December at 4:30,
The Wednesday, the first Wednesday in December.
first Wednesday of December.
Secure room. The June meeting in lieu of, I can go ahead or not.
I mean, it's a 5:30, we get out at 5:30.
I don't know, is there a meeting in June normally?
I think so.
You'd be.
Okay,
You don't wanna waste that.
nothing else, first Wednesday of December. There will
Even though it's a
be,
6 o'clock thing.
The 7th?
Julia will send out